Hey! Hi! How you doing? This is the Gamertron, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. So, Call of Duty, a very divisive, very popular video game franchise that is never not the talk of the town. Now, months ago, when the video game Call of Duty Infinite Warfare was first revealed, I found it quite ridiculous and laughable. You see, after Call of Duty's previous game, Call of Duty Black Ops 3, that was, by all means, a full-fledged science fiction first-person shooter, I didn't know entirely what to expect when it came to what the next game would be in the Call of Duty franchise. I assumed, for the most part, that would be Call of Duty Ghosts 2, since Activision shuffles between free developers for its yearly Call of Duty releases. And the last Call of Duty developer Infinity Ward made was Call of Duty Ghosts. I assumed they would make a sequel to Ghosts. Nope! They decided to make yet another sub-franchise within Call of Duty and take the Call of Duty franchise even further into the future, taking it into space with spaceships and everything. With Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, when the game was first revealed, I had almost zero interest in it, had no intention of picking it up or playing it. However, upon the game's release, it was gifted to me, which I am extremely grateful for, because despite all the negative backlash against Infinite Warfare, much of it warranted. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, however, as a standalone video game title, looking at it on its own, ignoring the rest of the franchise, and looking at the game on its own merits, is surprisingly a pretty decent video game. Good, even. So I wanted to take the time and make a video, an in-depth kind of review-like video where I give you my in-depth thoughts, feelings, and opinions towards Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. So, let's begin. Now, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, like all the games preceding it, has three main modes. Its single-player campaign, its PvE co-op survival horde mode, and its PvP multiplayer. Let's start with what I consider to be the best part of the package, and then work our way down to what I consider to be the worst part of the package. So, let me tell you my thoughts on the single-player campaign of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Infinite Warfare's campaign takes place hundreds of years into the future. Humanity has mastered space travel and has colonized almost all the worlds in our solar system. However, exploring and colonizing other worlds has not unfortunately led to the unification of humanity, but instead great division, with a new faction forming, the SDF. The Settlement Defense Front, an extremely militaristic faction whose only goal is complete conquest of the solar system and the subjugation of Earth. You play as fighter pilot turned captain Nick Reyes, voiced by the sheer awesomeness that is Brian Bloom. Brian Bloom, aka BJ Blazkowicz, and Varric. Nick Reyes is joined by his crew, including Nora Salter, Staff Sergeant Omar, and everyone's new favorite Call of Duty single-player campaign character, Ethan the Robot. Reyes and his crew must confront the SDF, protect the resources of Earth, and stop the evil Admiral Salem Koch, voiced and acted by Kit Harington, from taking over the Earth. The story of Infinite Warfare's campaign is simple and silly. It doesn't try to overcomplicate itself with any gray areas. It's very, very black and white. The forces of Earth are good, the SDF are bad. The SDF are really bad. The SDF are essentially space Nazis. The single-player campaign actually goes out of its way to inform and enforce to the player that the SDF are really, really evil. The game is silly sci-fi war nonsense, and I couldn't help but enjoy myself. You're playing as basically an all-American hero who's incredibly moral, honorable, charismatic, and friendly, taking on an evil, overwhelming opposing force of what is essentially space Nazis. Although the overall plot and setting for Infinite Warfare is cartoonish and silly, it does make way for some pretty good character development and engaging and gripping story moments. This is the first Call of Duty campaign in a long while where I genuinely really cared about the characters, and I really cared about the setting. I was genuinely engaged and immersed. The single-player campaign really goes out of its way to make you feel for the crew of your spaceship, the Retribution. You really come to get to know the different members of your crew, and you get to see them react through a variety of situations. There's also a surprising amount of lore in the game. In your captain's cabin, you can visit a computer terminal with bios and descriptions of all the characters, audio logs, just a surprising amount of backstory, lore, and character development. So despite the plot and setting being silly and simplistic, the actual characters are taken quite seriously. And I really did come to care about what was going on in the campaign. It was incredibly satisfying sticking it to the SDF, completing objectives that were securing Earth and making the SDF lose massive resources. Now, stepping away from setting and plot and characters for a bit, let's talk about the actual gameplay and set pieces. Because really, that is what the single-player campaigns of the Call of Duty video games are most known for, the action-packed set pieces and cinematic sequences. And whether you like or dislike Call of Duty, every single Call of Duty campaign has had impressive set pieces and cinematic sequences, and Infinite Warfare is no different. There are some truly jaw-dropping moments of epic spaceship battles, explosions, surviving near death, more explosions, incredible environmental effects, and the destruction and shape-shifting of the environment, and more explosions. It's very entertaining to watch and play through and experience. And the set pieces and cinematic sequences help freshen up and mix up the gameplay, especially the moments where you get to fly a Jackal, which is the most advertised aspect of Infinite Warfare, the fact that you get to fly a spaceship. And the Jackal spaceship fighter jet missions are some of my favorite and what I consider to be some of the best parts of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. The spaceship combat is slick, smooth, and responsive, but given just enough weight, just enough momentum, that you really do feel like you're flying a spaceship, a heavy piece of metal, while you're drifting and flying through the gravityless oceans of outer space. And the combat is so intense, frantic, and fast as you try to lock on to enemy targets, blast away with your lasers and machine guns, firing missiles at cruisers and destroyers, shooting off your flares to avoid incoming missiles and rockets at you, and then just the incredible satisfaction of when you finally hunt down and destroy enemy fighter jets, destroyers, and cruisers, and just watch them all explode. And the backdrops, the skyboxes of these spaceship sections, just look absolutely gorgeous. I know this is a weird thing to say, but Call of Duty Infinite Warfare is actually a pretty good game when it's not being a Call of Duty game. When Infinite Warfare is embracing what's unique about its Infinite Warfare setting and abandoning its traditional Call of Duty setting, then it's actually a pretty decent game. There's a lot of creativity and inspiration, imagination, and just absolute passion. You can see the passion and the effort in the cinematic set pieces, the cutscenes, and these Jackal spaceship fighter missions. And that's not to say that your typical first-person shooter Call of Duty gameplay isn't too bad on its own in the single-player campaign itself. It's about time I talked about the actual gameplay of the game. Now, one thing I have always liked about the Call of Duty video games is that they're very easy to pick up and play. If you've played any of the Call of Duty games, you will already have an idea of how Infinite Warfare plays. It's very simple, very to the point. There aren't a lot of complex mechanics here. You aim, you shoot, you crouch, you go prone, you jump, you aim down sights, yada yada yada. Again, not a lot of complicated mechanics, but when the game actually does implement complicated mechanics, unique abilities and weapons and items and equipment, then again, when it moves away from traditional Call of Duty gameplay, the game becomes quite a bit of fun, like these seeker grenades, these little spider robots that you throw down, they hunt down a target, latch onto them, and explode, or gravity grenades, which cause enemies to float in the air, giving you some harmless targets to pick off. Or when you get stuff like a deployable shield, a hacking tool that allows you to hack enemy robots and plays them for a short period of time. These unique mechanics and features, when added with the base, solid, first-person shooting of Infinite Warfare, actually make for some pretty fun and dynamic combat sequences. And there are some genuinely fun first-person shooter combat sequences in the campaign, where you're blasting away against hordes of enemies in colorful backgrounds with explosions everywhere, with gunfire and lasers littering the screen. It can be quite a bit of fun, and there are some satisfying weapons to play with. Granted, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare is one of the very few Call of Duty games where, in my personal opinion, there are quite a few weapons that I just didn't find satisfying. Now, in previous Call of Duty games, I've always had a couple weapons that I just didn't find fun, didn't find satisfying, but Infinite Warfare, half of the arsenal, at least to me, seems just unsatisfying, with weapons that just that don't have satisfying or fluid animations, really low quality audio with not a lot of power and impact behind it, weapons that just feel, for lack of a more intellectual word, lame. Don't get me wrong, there are some good weapons here, but this is the first time I've ever played a Call of Duty game where I feel like half the arsenal I just don't want to touch. They're just not fun to use. Now we come to the actual enemies you fight in the single player campaign. Now, Call of Duty is infamous for its generic bad guys, its generic enemy roster, where you're just fighting basically the same riflemen over and over and over again. However, I think the last few Call of Duties, Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, and Infinite Warfare have done a decent job at mixing up the enemy variety. There's actually quite a decent variety of enemies in Infinite Warfare. All the enemies in Infinite Warfare are surprisingly colorful and have a lot of unique designs in their space armor attire. I actually appreciate and find it quite fun shooting these extremely colorful, ridiculous looking space soldiers. And there's always that kind of satisfying explosion of oxygen and blood when you get a headshot and their helmets explode. Quite fun. There's also a variety of robots, melee-based robots, robots with guns, robots with heavy weapons and shields, much bigger mech-like mini-bosses, where you have to damage the individual parts of their bodies before you can do a actually pretty sick execution animation. Not to mention the different spaceships you fight in the Jackal spaceship fighter missions. There's actually a decent variety of enemies here that I found, for the most part, satisfying to kill. Now we come to the actual levels and environment and level design in the single player campaign, and it's pretty good for the most part. Since Infinite Warfare, of course, takes place in space, you're visiting cities on Earth, a variety of spaceships and space stations. You get to visit a shipping port on the moon, an asteroid mining colony that's super close to the sun, Mars, Europa, Titan. You explore and do battle all over the solar system, and there are some truly really good looking environments and levels in Call of Duty Infinite Warfare's campaign. There is a shocking amount of detail put into the environments and the level design, giving you ample room to take multiple paths. During combat, there's no one place to take cover, so even though Infinite Warfare is a linear game when it gets to its first-person shooter segments, you don't necessarily feel restricted when in these big battles. So overall, when it comes to the single-player campaign for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, I was very pleasantly surprised. There is a shocking amount of passion and effort put into the single player campaign, more so than the rest of the game. It really truly does feel like the campaign was the focus of Infinite Warfare. Usually it's the multiplayer that has all the money thrown at it, and it's the multiplayer that's the talk of the town every time a new Call of Duty releases, but really, Infinite Warfare's campaign is the standout part, the standout piece of this package, and that's very, very surprising for a Call of Duty video game. Usually, at least to me, I consider Call of Duty campaigns to be dumb fun. They're over-the-top, bombastic, Michael Bay blockbuster extravaganzas that you get some popcorn for, and you watch and play for the cinematics, the explosions, and the gunplay. Rarely have I ever seen a Call of Duty campaign be more than that, and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare's single-player campaign was more than that. I actually cared about the story, the setting, the characters, and was very, very surprised by the variety in its level design, set pieces, and its segments where you actually get to fly a spaceship. So, if you like single-player first-person shooter campaigns, I would actually recommend Call of Duty Infinite Warfare in that regard. So yeah, I really liked the campaign for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Now, let's take a look at Zombies, or Infinite Warfare's version of Call of Duty Zombies, Zombies in Spaceland, which is quite jarring. I'm very confused by the setting of Zombies in Spaceland because it's such a contrast to the rest of the game. I mean, just why the 80s? I get it, Infinite Warfare is silly, it's in space, they're trying to have fun with the whole sci-fi setting, but the 80s? Time travel? It's just such a jarring contrast from the rest of the content in the game. However, as for the actual mode itself, if you've played Call of Duty Zombies before, you have an idea of what it is going in. You kill zombies, you score points, you open doors, you explore more of the map, you buy better guns, you try to unlock and beat all the secrets and puzzles, and survive as many waves as possible. Basic premise. Typical Call of Duty Zombies premise, but there are a few new additions and changes here. There's actual theme park, arcade-style mini games you can play, which are, I have to admit, amusing distractions. And while the actual ridiculous setting and level design, just the art style of Zombies in Spaceland is quite entertaining and goofy and fun, and the mini games are fun, and again, it's a gorgeous environment, it's fun to explore, but unfortunately, kind of one of the most important parts about Call of Duty Zombies, what kept me playing Call of Duty Zombies and replaying Call of Duty Zombies for so long, was the satisfying, gunplay, the combat, the killing of hundreds of zombies. And unfortunately, Zombies in Spaceland just isn't as much fun as previous zombie modes. And it has a lot to do with the zombies themselves. They're just, I hate to say it, and I hate to insult the developers, insult Infinity Ward, but the zombies just aren't well animated. The blood and gore from previous Zombies modes is gone. There's no real satisfying impact and animation when you shoot and kill zombies with different weapons. And then there's just this. That's just so bad. So bad. How did that make it into the game? That looks so bad. That looks like something out of an early access alpha for an indie game. While I will praise Zombies and Spaceland for its ridiculous premise and level and setting, the actual level design, the art style, the minigames, I will praise all that. That is all well done. The actual combat, the actual gunplay and gameplay just isn't fun. In the single player campaign, killing SDF soldiers and robots is satisfying and fun. There's a variety of animations and different visual levels of impact when you shoot them. There's actual blood and gore, a variety of death animations. Granted, I will admit they do reuse a lot of death animations from previous Call of Duty games, but still. Killing zombies used to be some of the most fun I would have in Call of Duty games, and Infinite Warfare zombie mode, while it's got the look, it doesn't have the feel. And then we come to Call of Duty Infinite Warfare's multiplayer. Alright, I'm going to be blunt and straight to the point. It's trash. This is one of the worst first-person shooter multiplayers I've ever experienced. And it's not because of its hero system where you have a variety of different characters to play from, with special abilities and insta-kill weapons. It's not the actual weapons themselves, even though there are some that I don't find satisfying, and some more satisfying than others. It's not the actual map and level design. While some do leave something to be desired, they are decently designed and are good looking. It's not the actual game modes themselves. It's not the kill streaks or the progression system. What absolutely kills this multiplayer mode is its time to kill and its OP pay-to-win weapons. Unlike in the single-player campaign where enemies just have the right amount of health, where you can get a satisfying kill and you get a feel for how powerful the weapon is, in multiplayer, for some reason, every weapon kills almost goddamn instantly. How are you supposed to get a feel and satisfying feedback from that kill with that weapon if everyone dies in 1 or 2 hits? Now, I've played multiplayer games with low time to kill, Rainbow Six Siege, Titanfall 2, previous Call of Duties, but the TTK was never so low that whenever you entered a gunfight, there was an impossibility for you to retaliate or protect yourself or get into cover or actually have a proper gunfight. You cannot do that in Infinite Warfare. From what I've played, there appears to be no damage fall off no matter the range. Weapons that in the single player campaign genuinely felt different from one another feel almost exactly the same because they kill everyone in almost the exact same amount of time with the exact same amount of bullets. But even a worse offender than the TTK you could at least get used to and accept. What you can't accept, what you will never get used to, is that there are genuinely better weapons that players who have been playing the game for a long time and have leveled up will already have, and have an advantage over you, or players who spend money and get those weapons right away. There are weapons in Infinite Warfare's multiplayer, there are weapons that are versions of already existing weapons that just have better stats and have special attributes. These special attributes making them genuinely better than all the other weapons in the game. So if you're a new player, if you're a noob, don't even bother playing the goddamn game, because there are players who, because they've been playing from day one and got to max level, or because they spent enough money in the microtransaction system to buy those weapons right off the bat, have a genuine significant advantage to you. And it just breaks the multiplayer. It shatters it. I have zero interest to play the multiplayer outside of bots, just experimenting and goofing around with bots. That's the only genuine fun to really be had from Infinite Warfare's multiplayer, is messing around with the bots, selecting their difficulty, upping their health, so that everyone doesn't die in one hit, and that you're actually almost on a fair and even playing ground because the bots don't get access to the weapons with special perks that players do. Usually, I advocate for bots in multiplayer games so that multiplayer modes and multiplayer games in those types of games can last forever, and you can always experience and revisit the content. But in Infinite Warfare, playing with the bots might as well be the only option, because there's no reason to drop into the public PvP multiplayer. The time to kill is so low, and so fast, it's just infuriating and just not fun. And that doubles and triples with the players who have access to genuinely better weapons than you, that unless you're willing to grind dozens if not hundreds of hours to get, you may as well just pay for in order to be on the same playing field as other players. And it's a shame, because the levels, the actual multiplayer maps in Infinite Warfare's multiplayer are actually decent, and I actually like the idea of the whole rigs system, which is just like the specialist system from Black Ops 3 and is different playable, selectable hero characters like in what we've been seeing from many multiplayer games recently. The actual content in the multiplayer itself isn't bad, but these specific gameplay mechanic decisions, these base elements of the game, these high-end, OP, genuinely superior weapons, and the low time to kill, those two things just completely ruin the multiplayer for me. I have no interest, no drive, no engagement to want to play more of it. Unless every once in a while I may feel like goofing around with the bots, but hey, I could always just replay missions in the single-player campaign. So, in the end, my thoughts of Infinite Warfare boil down to this. The single-player campaign is actually pretty good, and I recommend it. I had a lot of fun with it, and it genuinely made me feel like I was captain of a spaceship in an intergalactic space war. Very engaging, very immersive, very fun. Zombies is really hit and miss. Some people are really gonna like it. Others, I think, will come to the same conclusions I did, that it's just not as satisfying as previous zombie modes, and the multiplayer, I'm sorry, in my opinion, it's just utter trash. So that is the curious case of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, a game with three sides: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Overall, for the sake of the single-player campaign, I am actually glad that I played Infinite Warfare. I'm actually quite grateful that I didn't skip out on it in the games I played in 2016. And that has been a video. I hope you liked the video. If you did indeed like the video in any way, shape, or form, please be sure to hit the like button. Hitting the like button helps you, helps me, helps everybody involved with the video. If you hit the like button, please leave a comment. What are your thoughts, feelings, and opinions on the video and the topic of this video? Let me know your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in the comment section down below. I love reading comments. Again, nearly enough comments. Please leave a comment. If you want to help out and support this video, then please consider sharing it on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to help out and support me directly, well, there's always Patreon. Anyways, guys, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later.